The sound of my laptop hitting each step echoed through the house like gunshots. Prick, thud, prick, thud, until it finally came to rest at the bottom of the staircase. The screen completely shattered and the keyboard scattered across the hardwood floor. Oops, accidents happen. Mason laughed, wiping his hands on his jeans like he'd just finished taking out the trash. I stared down at the wreckage of 18 months of work. My master's thesis in artificial intelligence. Research that could revolutionize machine learning algorithms. Code that had taken me 6 months to write in perfect. All of it gone because my stepbrother thought it would be funny to grab my laptop and toss it down the stairs. Mason. Dad's voice called from the living room, but it lacked any real authority. What was that noise? Nothing, just Elena being clumsy with her computer, Mason called back, grinning at me. I knelt down and started gathering the pieces. Fragments of screen, loose keys, bits of plastic that had once been part of something important. Something that represented everything I'd worked for. Dad appeared at the top of the stairs, took one look at the destruction and sighed. Elena, you really need to be more careful with your things. I didn't drop it, I said quietly, not looking up from the wreckage. Mason said you were clumsy. Mason threw it down the stairs. Dad looked at Mason, who shrugged with an exaggerated innocence that I'd come to hate over the past 3 years. She was being all dramatic about her important work. I was just trying to help her loosen up. I was presenting my thesis defense next week, I said, still kneeling on the floor. 18 months of research was on that laptop. Don't you have backups? Dad asked. Some of it. Not everything. The latest code revisions, the final analysis. Well, that's why they invented cloud storage, Mason interrupted. Maybe this will teach you to be more responsible. I finally looked up at him. 21 years old, 6'2", with the kind of easy confidence that came from never facing real consequences for anything. Mason had been my stepbrother since Mom married his dad when I was 19, and in those 3 years he'd made it his personal mission to remind me that I didn't belong in this family. Mason, that wasn't very nice, Dad said, but his tone suggested that destroying someone's life work was roughly equivalent to leaving dirty dishes in the sink. Come on, Richard, Mason said, using my dad's first name like they were buddies instead of stepfather and stepson. Boys will be boys. Besides, Elena's always so serious about everything. She needed to lighten up. Dad actually chuckled. You're not wrong about that. I stared at them both. Mason, who had just destroyed months of my work and was being praised for it, and Dad, who thought his stepdaughter losing her master's thesis was character building. I have to call my advisor, I said, standing up with the broken pieces of my laptop. Don't be so dramatic about it, Mason called after me. It's just schoolwork. Just schoolwork. My research into neural network optimization that could improve AI processing speeds by 300%. My thesis that had already caught the attention of 3 major tech companies. My ticket to a PhD program at MIT. Just schoolwork. I went to my room and closed the door, setting the laptop fragments on my desk like evidence from a crime scene. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the secure app that connected me to Sterling Technologies, the company I'd built in secret over the past 5 years. The company that was worth $2.3 billion. The company that funded artificial intelligence research programs at 17 universities across the country, including the Whitmore Engineering Fellowship Program at State University. The program that paid for Mason's full-ride scholarship, his housing, his meal plan, and his monthly stipend. I scrolled through my phone until I found the contact I was looking for. Dr. Patricia Chin, director of the Whitmore program. Dr. Chin? This is Elena Sterling from Sterling Technologies. I need to schedule an emergency review of one of our fellowship recipients. Of course, Miss Sterling. Which student? Mason Hartwell. ID number 2847. Let me pull up his file. Ah yes, junior year computer science major. He's been one of our recipients for 2 years now. Is there a problem with his academic performance? I need a complete review of his conduct, both academic and personal. And I need it by tomorrow morning. That's very fast turnaround, but we can accommodate. May I ask what prompted this urgent review? I looked at the broken pieces of my laptop, at the thesis work that would take me weeks to reconstruct, at the defense presentation I'd have to postpone. Let's call it a character assessment. After I hung up, I called my personal assistant. Sarah, I need you to compile everything we have on Mason Hartwell. Academic records, disciplinary actions, social media activity, everything. How comprehensive do you want this? I want to know every time he's been late to class, every party he's attended, every inappropriate comment he's made online. Everything. I'll have it to you by tonight. Then I called my head of security. Marcus, I need surveillance footage from my father's house. Specifically, the staircase area from about 20 minutes ago. We have cameras in your father's house? I had them installed when I moved back in for grad school. For insurance purposes. That wasn't entirely true. I'd had them installed because I didn't trust Mason and my instincts had been right. I'll have the footage to you within the hour. My final call was to my lawyer. Jennifer, hypothetically, if someone destroyed research data worth millions of dollars in potential patents, what would our legal options be? Depends on the circumstances. Was it intentional? Very. Do we have evidence? Video evidence. Then we'd be looking at destruction of property, potentially industrial sabotage if they knew the value of what they were destroying. Why do you ask? I'll send you a video file in an hour. Tell me what you think. I spent the rest of the afternoon reconstructing what I could of my thesis from backup files and cloud storage. I managed to recover about 60% of my work, but the latest algorithms, the breakthrough code that had taken me 3 months to perfect, was gone. That evening, I sat in my room reviewing the reports my team had compiled on Mason. The picture they painted was exactly what I'd expected. A mediocre student who spent more time partying than studying, who had multiple conduct violations that had been mysteriously swept under the rug, and who regularly posted social media content that would make a university's PR department cringe. The surveillance footage from the staircase was even more damning. It clearly showed Mason grabbing my laptop from my hands and deliberately throwing it down the stairs while I pleaded with him to stop. Then his laughter as he watched it break apart. It was not an accident. It was not boys being boys. It was deliberate destruction of property by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. I forwarded everything to Dr. Chin with a simple note. As requested, please find attached the character assessment materials for Mason Hartwell. I await your decision regarding the continuation of his fellowship. Then I went to sleep. The next morning I was awakened by screaming from downstairs. What do you mean revoked? Mason's voice carried through the entire house. I got dressed and went downstairs to find Mason on the phone in the kitchen, his face red and his voice getting higher with each word. No, you don't understand. I need that scholarship. I can't afford to stay in school without it. Dad sat at the kitchen table with his coffee looking confused. What's going on? Mason's scholarship was revoked, Mom said quietly from the stove, where she was making breakfast with shaking hands. Revoked? Why? They won't tell him. Just said there was a review of his conduct and they decided he no longer met the program's standards. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table, listening to Mason's increasingly frantic phone conversation. I don't care about social media posts from 2 years ago. Everyone makes mistakes. This is ruining my life. Social media posts? Dad asked. Apparently there were some inappropriate things on his Instagram, Mom explained. And some issues with his academic performance. But he's been getting good grades. He's been getting C's and D's, I corrected. That's not exactly scholarship material. Mason spun around to glare at me, the phone still pressed to his ear. This is none of your business, Elena. Actually, it kind of is. How is it your business? I took a sip of my coffee. Because I fund the Whitmore Engineering Fellowship Program. The kitchen went dead silent. Mason slowly lowered the phone. What did you say? I said I fund the program. Sterling Technologies donates $12 million a year to support engineering fellowships at State University. Mason's scholarship comes from my company. That's impossible, Dad said. Elena, you're a graduate student. You don't have a company. I have several companies actually. Sterling Technologies is just the biggest one. Mom turned around from the stove, her face pale. Elena, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the artificial intelligence company I built while everyone in this family was treating me like an underachieving college student. The company that's worth $2.3 billion. The company that funds the scholarship program that pays for Mason's education. Mason's phone clattered to the floor. You're lying. Am I? I pulled out my phone and opened the Sterling Technologies website. There's my photo on the About Us page. Elena Sterling, CEO and founder. I turned the phone so they could all see it. The professional headshot had taken for the company website showed me in a tailored suit, standing in front of the Sterling Technologies logo. That could be anyone, Mason said weakly. Could it? I opened another app. This is the administrative portal for the Whitmore program. Would you like to see the email I sent yesterday requesting a review of fellowship recipient Mason Hartwell? Mason lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back. Don't touch me, Mason. You've done enough damage. Elena, Dad's voice was very quiet. Are you saying you had Mason's scholarship revoked? I'm saying I requested a review of his conduct. The review found that he violated multiple terms of his fellowship agreement. The revocation was the university's decision. What conduct violations? Mom asked. I scrolled through the report on my phone. Underage drinking at university events, documented by campus security. Harassment of female students, including unwanted physical contact. Academic dishonesty. He submitted a paper for his software engineering class that was actually written by his roommate. And yesterday, deliberate destruction of property belonging to another person. That's all lies. Mason shouted. Is it? I showed them the surveillance footage on my phone. This is from yesterday afternoon. Watch carefully. The video clearly showed Mason grabbing my laptop and throwing it down the stairs while I begged him to stop. It showed him laughing afterward. It showed Dad dismissing the whole thing as, boys will be boys. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of my laptop hitting the stairs over and over again through my phone's speaker. Oh my God, Mom whispered. Mason, you told us Elena dropped it. I was just messing around. You destroyed 18 months of research, I said. Research that could have changed the field of artificial intelligence. Research that was worth millions of dollars in potential patents. I didn't know. You didn't care. You thought it was funny to destroy something that was important to me. Dad finally found his voice. Elena, sweetheart, I had no idea about your company. Why didn't you tell us? When would I have told you? When you were dismissing my work as just schoolwork? When you were explaining that Mason destroying my property was character building? I didn't know it was important. You didn't know it was important because you never bothered to ask. In 3 years, Dad, you've never once asked me what my research was about. You've never asked about my classes, my professors, my future plans. You just assumed I was wasting time in graduate school. That's not true. It's completely true. Mason could tell you every detail about his computer science classes because you actually listen when he talks. But you have no idea what I study because you tune out whenever I mention my work. Mom set down her spatula with shaking hands. Elena, we didn't realize. You didn't realize because you didn't want to realize. It was easier to think of me as the quiet stepdaughter who wasn't as impressive as your biological son. That's not how we see you. It's exactly how you see me. Or how you saw me anyway. Mason had been quiet during this exchange, but now he stepped forward. Elena, look, I'm sorry about your laptop. I really am. But you can't destroy my entire future over one mistake. One mistake. I looked at him incredulously. Mason, you've been making mistakes for 3 years. The scholarship review just cataloged all of them. But I need that money. I can't afford college without it. You should have thought about that before you decided to harass female students and cheat on your assignments. Those were minor things. Sexual harassment isn't minor, Mason. Academic dishonesty isn't minor. And deliberately destroying someone's research definitely isn't minor. You're ruining my life. No, Mason. I'm letting you experience the consequences of your choices for the first time in your life. Dad stood up from the table. Elena, surely there's something you can do. Some way to reinstate his scholarship. Why would I do that? Because he's family. Is he? Because yesterday when he destroyed my laptop, you told me it was my own fault for being clumsy. When I said he threw it down the stairs, you laughed and said, boys will be boys. That doesn't sound like how you treat family. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Just like you didn't want to know that your stepdaughter had built a billion-dollar company while living under your roof. Mom stepped forward. Elena, please. Mason made a mistake, but he's learned his lesson. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive him. Have I learned my lesson? I asked Mason directly. What? You said you destroyed my laptop to teach me to lighten up and be less serious about my work. So tell me, what lesson have I learned? Mason stared at me, clearly not understanding the question. Have I learned to be less serious about my work? Have I learned to lighten up about my research? I don't know. Then you failed to teach me anything. Which means your destruction of my property was pointless cruelty, not a life lesson. I finished my coffee and stood up from the table. Where are you going? Dad asked. To my lab. I have work to do. Elena, wait. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. We needed to talk about this 3 years ago when Mason first started treating me like garbage and you enabled it. We needed to talk about this yesterday when you watched him destroy my property and blamed me for it. Now it's too late. It's never too late. It is for Mason's scholarship. The decision is final. You can't just destroy his future. I'm not destroying his future. I'm removing my financial support from someone who has proven he doesn't deserve it. Mason's voice became desperate. Elena, please. I'll do anything. I'll apologize, I'll pay you back for the laptop, You'll what? Promise to be a better person? Mason, you're 21 years old. If you haven't figured out basic human decency by now, a scholarship isn't going to teach it to you. But I can't afford college without the fellowship. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to be a terrible person. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at my family. By the way, Mason, you might want to start looking for a new place to live. The apartment you're renting near campus? That building is owned by Sterling Properties, one of my subsidiary companies. I'll be reviewing all our tenant agreements for conduct violations. Mason's face went white. You own my apartment building? I own a lot of things, Mason. Things you never bothered to ask about because you were too busy assuming I was a loser. Elena, please. The lease review will take about a week. I'd start packing if I were you. I left them standing in the kitchen and drove to my lab, where I spent the day reconstructing my thesis algorithms. It would take another month to fully recover my work, but I had the time now that I wasn't wasting energy on people who didn't value me. That evening I received 36 text messages from Mason, alternating between apologies and threats. I forwarded them all to my lawyer and then blocked his number. Dad called twice. I let it go to voicemail. Mom sent a long email explaining that they'd had no idea about my success and that they were so proud of what I'd accomplished. The email asked if there was anything they could do to fix the situation with Mason. I deleted it without responding. A week later, Mason moved back in with his parents. His new college was a community college about an hour away, the only place that would accept his transfer application mid-semester. 2 weeks after that, I received a formal letter from Dad's lawyer, threatening to sue me for abuse of corporate power and destroying a young man's future. My lawyer responded with a detailed breakdown of Mason's conduct violations and a reminder that Sterling Technologies was under no obligation to fund students who violated their agreement terms. We also included a copy of the surveillance footage showing Mason deliberately destroying my property. Dad's lawyer stopped returning his calls. A month later, I successfully defended my thesis. The presentation went perfectly, and my research was accepted for publication in 3 major academic journals. MIT formally accepted me into their PhD program with full funding. Dr. Chin attended my defense presentation. Afterward, she approached me privately. Ms. Sterling, I wanted to thank you for bringing Mason Hartwell's conduct to our attention. We'd had complaints about him for months, but no one had documented everything properly. I'm glad I could help maintain the program's standards. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. We're expanding the fellowship program next year, and we're looking for additional funding partners. Would Sterling Technologies be interested in supporting more students? Absolutely. But I'd like to implement more rigorous screening procedures. Academic excellence isn't enough if the student lacks basic character. I couldn't agree more. 6 months later, the Whitmore Engineering Fellowship Program implemented new conduct standards that required ongoing behavioral assessments for all recipients. The program became known as one of the most selective and prestigious engineering scholarships in the country. Mason, meanwhile, dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Last I heard, he was working at a retail store and living with his parents. He never apologized for destroying my laptop. Not really. His messages had all been variations of, "I'm sorry you're upset," rather than actual acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But that was fine. I didn't need his apology. I had something better. The knowledge that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're untouchable. A year later, I was featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue. The article described my work in artificial intelligence and the breakthrough algorithms that had emerged from my master's thesis research. Dad texted me a screenshot of the article with the message, "So proud of you, honey. Can we talk?" I read the message, thought about it for exactly 10 seconds and then deleted it. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. But some family members aren't worth the timber anyway.